Welcome back. In recent weeks, the U.S. has turned up the heat on China over the strength of the yuan, or lack thereof. Our next guest says that the currency is not the silver bullet issue when it comes to trade between the United States and China. Susan Schwab was a U.S. trade representative from 2006 to 2009. She's now a professor at the University of Maryland and joins us this morning from Washington. It's wonderful to have you on the program. I guess that the prime issue here is that question of whether China allowing its currency to appreciate will allow for U.S. growth. Are the two issues truly that linked?
Clearly, China's unwillingness to let the renminbi appreciate is a problem for us, for our economy, but not just for our economy, for a lot of other economies, both developed and developing countries. A lot of countries in the Asian Pacific region are equally concerned about the lack of strength in the renminbi, the artificial holding down the value of the renminbi. So yes, that is having an impact. And last week there were some good hearings. I thought Fred Bergston from the Peterson Institute, the Secretary of Treasury, all made very interesting comments. The question is, what's going to be done? But that is not the only trade problem we have with China. And I would say market access issues, intellectual property rights, indigenous innovation are just as serious and need to be taken on quite aggressively.
Well, in that same week, we did see two cases being taken by the U.S. to the World Trade Organization about steelmakers and credit card companies. In your opinion, do you think that Beijing discriminates against U.S. companies in both of those areas?
I think that the cases, I was glad to see the cases finally being brought. This administration has appeared to sort of pull its punches vis-a-vis China, whether on currency or on other issues, over the last year and a half. And I think within the last couple weeks, we've seen a step up, certainly in the rhetoric. I welcome the two cases being filed. The cases that Tim Geithner talked about last week that were won on intellectual property were cases, in fact, that we filed during the Bush administration. So they need to step up, use multilateral fora such as the WTO, such as the IMF to address China. We would make a terrible mistake by unilaterally passing legislation that would be designed to, quote, fix the problem, which wouldn't fix the problem at all. Unilateral and punitive legislation is not the way to go, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be aggressive and active in working with our trading partners and the rules that exist that China needs to be following.
You know, you say that Treasury Secretary Geithner should have gone ahead early on and called China a currency manipulator in its first report. Why didn't the Bush administration, during your time in office, label China a currency manipulator if these issues preceded this administration?
I mean, part of this is the whole issue of labeling China as a currency manipulator isn't going to do anyone any good. I mean, in a way, it's a matter of let's get it done, get it over with, and move on and do something about the problem. The Chinese, from their perspective, they're not predatory, but they are clearly self-absorbed, which is not surprising. They're focused on a lot of problems that they have, that they want to deal with, and they're worried about their employment. The question is, if they are doing so in a way that has a negative impact on us and on other countries and creates instability and unhealthy imbalances, then they have to be brought to task by their trading partners so that they understand that that's not without a cost.
Well, doesn't a weak yuan ultimately, though, make life possible for those who need to go out and buy cheap goods? I mean, in some ways, is there a benefit to the U.S. economy to having China keep its currency artificially low?
There are costs and benefits with just about any kind of trade policy. The question is, are we talking about an artificial comparative advantage, and what kind of impact is that having? I mean, one of the points that was made earlier was the manufacturing sector in this country is leading us out of, has led us out of recession. Part of that is because we are exporting, and part of that is because we're exporting to China and other countries. And yes, U.S. importers and U.S. consumers in particular have more choice and have more variety at better prices because there is competition. At what point does that sort of tip over into a predatory practice that permanently disadvantages other trading partners?
Some would argue that we need to have the Chinese come here more and open up shop and create jobs that way. Do you think that those trade barriers should be restricted to allow more foreign direct investment by Chinese firms?
Well, we have very few barriers. We have virtually no barriers to inward investment. The only rules that we have that are related to national security are used very infrequently. And yes, the Chinese should be looking at this market to invest. And to the extent that there is pushback in this country, it is political. It is not economic.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Ambassador, former Ambassador on Trade, Susan Schwab, joining us from Washington this morning.